Hey everybody, it is Alan, and welcome to the show tonight. Hopefully everybody can hear me. If you can, throw up a thumbs up because we're going to roll into a really big show. Now, the one thing that we're going to cover tonight is there was a classic battle that many of you may not be aware of that happened in 1989 through the 1990s, and it was the classic wide versus narrow pan car battle. So prior to about 1989, all of the pan cars were one dimension. They were what we consider today a wide car. In 89, you began to see what was called a narrow car, which is the current cars today. So everything that we run today is would have been considered a narrow car, and it was based off of the width of the wheels, not the wheelbase, but actually the tread width. Now, the car that we're going to look at tonight actually was one of the final wide cars that was commercially available. It was made by some really cool folks down in Louisville, Georgia, and it was a company called Bolink. Bolink actually competed extraordinarily well against Associated. Cobra had a car. There was an Aggressor. There was a number of them, and the tides began to kind of turn through the 90s as the narrow cars started to get more progressive. They did come out with an LTO narrow car, which we'll cover in a couple of weeks or so. But I want to go all the way back to 1989 or so, and we're going to talk about this car here, which is in this box says that it is the Super Sport 1/10 scale RC car kit. Again, this came out of, like I said, Lawrenceville, Georgia. And this is actually got a couple of different things going on inside the box that we'll talk about. Now, let me grab, this is a little piece of history here. Let me grab this book real quick. This is actually radio control model cars, July 1990. And you can see this was the heydays of NASCAR. That's actually also a wide car. Now, our friends at Bolink were known for a couple of things. One, they made this really cool bumper sticker that came with every kit, which was the difference between men and boys is the price of their toys. The second thing that they were known for was their classic advertising. So here is one. I was trying to think, and if Steve Rule is on tonight, I'm trying to figure out if that was Steve or not in the picture. But this is classic 1990 advertising. We got a $50 reward and a whole bunch of stuff going on. I won't read through that. But this car, actually, there's another, by the way, another page here, which is saying, Bolink congratulates the 1990 Reedy Invitation winner, Andy Dobson. Now, he was running the Bolink 89 T-Bird, which keep that in the back of your heads before we open up. Then, if we go a little bit deeper into our magazine, there's actually, and I lost the page when I did this, so hold on. I had this marked out. There's actually a picture of the car under tires and things. Now, this one sold for about $160. There was a gold edition, which is actually here on the side of the box. But basically, you got some gold pieces and you got some gold tires and that. But this was the basic. Now, the other thing that's interesting about this car is we had a whole plethora of bodies that we could run. Now, let me open this up. Somebody, I'll get to this in a second. Somebody decided that they needed a Yosemite Sam Goodwrench Buick Regal. Now, you'll notice this is an extraordinarily, let me get it down here where you can see it, extraordinarily wide body compared to what we run now, what we ran later. The 89, we happen to have one. This is the 1989 T-Bird body that was the national winner, and they made a ton of these. So this was the T-Bird, this was the Buick. I didn't unpack it. I was going to bring one of the Luminas, but I didn't unpack it. But we'll bring that out another night. We're going to do a body show here pretty soon. And but this is, like I said, just an incredible piece of history. It's a little hard to see on the video. So let's unpack it. Now, there's a couple of things to keep in mind. You got the owner's manual in here. And if you are wondering, I do have all the body posts. I just take them off because not everything will fit in the box when it goes back into the library. Now, this, in all of its glory, and we'll just move this. Actually, I think I can unplug the antenna right here. This is classic 1990s technology. So let's dig into, like we usually do, let's dig into some of the electronics that we have going on, and then we'll get to this. Actually, let's do this first. So this chassis was an alternate, cheaper version. It had this spring-loaded dampener in the back that would replace the two-shock configuration. Now, unlike the hyperdrive car that we showed last week, this is a T-plate car, and it was a very wide T-plate. And what you had then, same deal, is you would have, instead of the set screws at the front, they were actually back here in the back. You'd take it down, and then you'd go through there. And you would also set the tweak with these. So these acted as limiters, and this would actually set it. So you'd adjust these, and that's how you got the tweak into the car. And kind of a really, like I said, really cool kind of configuration. Giant one piece. It doesn't have a separate pod. So this was all cut out of one piece. And then, interestingly enough, you actually had these cast pieces, which I thought were, yes, it is an old Bolink. Now, they were one of the few guys that actually had cast pieces. Most folks were running cut pieces. It also came with a steel axle. Later on, that was available in fiberglass. You could also change it out with a graphite one, but this is the original steel. And then Delrin hubs. Now, the other cool thing that Bolink did is they actually had their own line of tires, and they labeled them kind of like a Goodyear. So they would have the Bolink, Fast Track. One of the things that folks didn't like about these was that you had a lot of flex, and you can see it right here, just a lot of flex in that rear wheel. T&M Racing Compounds later would come out with a cap that goes in theirs. They had a very similar setup, but they would put a cap in it. And same deal you had up front. Pretty cool wheel design going on there. So let's go back to the electronics here. We're going to run classic double battery. So it was split pack. So 2 on each side, or 3 on each side, 2 sides, right? Now, an interesting thing, and no one else did this, is Bolink put in these little spacers, these plastic inserts that you'd put between the cells. What that did, that actually allowed you, instead of taping them in, you would screw them to the chassis on both sides, and that's actually what kept the batteries in. If you're not familiar, there were 2 types of Sanyos at that time. There would have been this, which was the longer run SCEs, which were 1700s, and then you would have had a 1200 or a 1400 red pack. So kind of an unusual. You didn't see a lot of pan cars with the SCEs in it. Must have been probably modified, which is what. Yeah, there's a modified in this car, so you would have had that. This would have given you a stellar 3 minutes and 45 seconds of SCRs. Thank you. That would have given you a stellar 3 minutes and 45 seconds of runtime. We ran 4-minute races as we do today. And with the wrong gear, a little bit too aggressive driving, you would not make the final bell on a full song. And that was where the reference to dumping would come along. Now, this has got a big O, because it is running a modified. It had a big O 410 MXC Novak speed control. You've got a couple of pots that are worth mentioning. This one here is actually the neutral. So this is what you would set your radio, since we didn't have electronic radios at the time. The way you set that was that basically you would turn this until the wheels would stop turning, and then that would be the center point, and the other side was the high speed, which is basically the high end pot that would set how fast the car would go based on how far you pulled the trigger. This gigantic classic 75 megahertz AM servo receiver and this extraordinarily long antenna setup ran on channel 86. And then what you would do, if somebody else had 86, you would take this crystal out. Woo, been in there a while. You take that crystal out, which was set at 75.91, and then replace that with an 87 or an 88, 90. There were odd numbers or even numbers. Unless you had some special ones, then everybody was trying to collect those. There were even odd numbers. There was a whole bunch of stuff going on because almost everything seems like it shipped out with an 86 or 84. And so that was a pretty normal thing. The motor in this is a pocket rocket, and it's a classic. I don't know if you can, let me get the label. Dr. Von Quick. And I do not know. Oh, it's a 12-turn motor. And so the way that the motor would work, I won't take it out, but basically the timing was set. You would loosen a screw on the top, a screw on the bottom, and you would turn the timer up and down. And that was how the pocket rocket would go up or down. Basically, it was a torque versus high-end trade-off. And then this ran aluminum gear on there, and then a turned. I don't think that's that's a cut gear, but I don't know. Somebody might know already on there who made it. So that's essentially the basic electronic setup. Same deal as we talked about on some previous shows. I've never seen these connectors used. They're actually pretty cool. So you had positive, negative goes into the speed control, comes out of the speed control, and goes on to the motor. And what you did, like we talked about before, you would share the positive. So what this actually does is the positive goes here, goes in, and comes out in the same spot. So 3 wires in the speed control, and you're sharing that the positive. It is running a standard high-speed Futaba 132H, which was the low-end Futaba small one, which was plastic gears and kind of all of the splendor of a low-end servo at that time. So that's kind of the electronics layout. Wow, a lot of people talking. Let's see what we got. Sorry, I wasn't paying attention. Mr. Blackwell, Bolink ruled the Sugar Bowl. I think that's an absolute understatement. I think that was their home track, and it was fantastic. John Wesley Norman says that's awesome. I actually started on a Bolink LTO car. I missed, I started after this car. Let's see. Had a lot of, Daniel, you had a hot trick? That's pretty sweet. The T-Bird was the body to have all the way up until probably the most popular body. I got to think it was the most popular body ever made in pan car racing, which was the Bolink 1997 Grand Prix, and Andy McClellan and all of those guys, Roman and Chris Smith and all those guys just crushed it in that era. So a bunch of old names. The dude that used to run Dylan's Motorsports too, I can't think of his name all of a sudden, out of Tennessee. They just killed it. Let's see. It's an old Bolink. Yep, we talked about that. Looks like somebody turned the wheels down. Yeah, I was glad this is that they actually had the label still on it. That came off pretty easy, especially when we were using straight up Paragon. The battery blocks we talked about. Yeah, Twister. And by the way, Twister made the best lathes too. Let's see. Yeah, you would carry. So for everybody that was born in the last 25 years, the way the crystals worked is you actually had an anti-static box. And what the anti-static box would do is you'd have the receiver and the transmitter crystals. And so you might carry, golly, 12, maybe 15 of them if you could acquire that many. And then what you would do is you go up and you get a frequency clip. And if you went up, the fastest car got to choose the frequency. So if you qualified 6th and somebody else was on your frequency and you couldn't switch, you didn't get to run because we didn't have the switching technology that, golly, saves us all today. So there was a lot of stuff happening with that. Let's see. Poor car needs some upgrades. I love that. Yeah. Oh, and so this is another one. So Jeremy, great point. Is somebody would always be screaming, somebody's got their radio on, because if 2 radios were on the same frequency, you would get a horrible glitch, probably end your day. And probably the best example, we were practicing for, I forget what race it was. I was living in Florida, so it was 1997. We drove up to the Sugar Bowl, and I absolutely killed a car when somebody turned their radio on in practice. And to this day, I'm still in therapy. Like probably for another year, they said I'll be able to get out. Let's see. Run every day during the pandemic. That's awesome, Todd. Let's see. I still have a Bolink Sport Eliminator. Yep. Yes. So that's one. I actually don't have the Bolink quick battery change. So one of the things they do, and this happened it happened at King. They did it in Orlando, and basically at Lake Whippoorwill, they'd run 100 lap, 200 lap races with pit stops, and they would pull in and the battery would drop out of the car. There was actually a latch. Battery dropped out, you changed it and went on. It was some of the coolest things. They're really hard to find. If somebody has one and they don't want it, PM me. I am always a buyer for that. When was the McAllister conversion released? I gotta think. We should get with some of the guys over at McAllister. He may not know. I gotta think the McAllister would have been 91 or 2. Somebody fact check me on that. We were running Sideway City in Wayland, Michigan when that came out, and that would have put me right around high school. So I think that's when it was. Are you selling that pan car? I am never selling that pan car. Let's see. Radio Impound, the Velo car. Oh, you missed the Velo car a couple of weeks ago, Blackwell. And then the Thunder. Oh, yeah, you're right. The Thunderdrome did do that. 100% right. And there was a track in Jacksonville, Florida, that had a couple of races that did it. So we'll see. Mike Johns from Sideway City is here. How about that? Man, yeah. And so that's awesome, Mike. Let's see. By the way, Mike, I still have my Sideway Cities t-shirt. And so I got to dig that out quick. Oh, I was just talking about the Cheetah car today, Brian. I remember one of the Lightspeed connectors. I think it was Associated. I think those are right. I think that was an Associated connector. There was like 4 or 5. There was some really weird. Wayland was. If you guys didn't get the chance to run Sideway City, which I think. I grew up in Michigan, so we had JT Hobbies, Riders Hobby Shop in Kalamazoo. We had Sideway City in Wayland. We had the Michigan 500, which was a carpet track up in. It was up by Steel Case in Grand Rapids, and then we had one a couple over in Detroit. It was a hot spot for RC cars. It was pretty awesome time in RC there. Now. Let me get back to a few things that were not super obvious on these cars. A couple of things. One, absolutely, with this top plate, there was absolutely no real way of adjusting the camber on the car. Now, that would change, and we'll talk about it. We showed one last week where you could do the two pieces. Ultimately, they would replace this with some other parts, and they did get to that. They also went to a winged version where this moved up and down. I've got one. I'm going to have to dig it out, though. But the reason I wanted to show this up front is you could actually do camber. Now, what would happen is underneath here, you had, let me see if I can get it around where you can, it's always hard to contort these. Maybe not with the wheels on, but right there. Right here, you had a piece of fuel line. And what the fuel line would allow you to do is you had aluminum pivots on the front, and you would crank down these three nuts, and that would actually pitch this plate back. And that's how you adjusted your camber gain on that. And so Rivertown Racers, yeah. I forgot. There was also in Grand Rapids, did Rivertown run the asphalt track in the park over by the original Meyer? There's that one. And then there was one in Lansing too, by the way. We ran on asphalt. So that was kind of how you managed to do that. And again, this is simple racing. You're moving these. Ultimately, 3 or 4 different spring combinations came out, and you could adjust that, and that gave you your tweak. You adjusted this to get your camber. Now, what I want to do is shift gears real quick and talk about a couple of other things that came out. Now, it wasn't long. This piece here, this 3-piece design, began to get very popular. This is, I should have brought, I have one in the bag still. This one's a used one. I thought it'd be easier to see. This was made by Sassy Chassis, and I think if the Bolink guys are on, I don't know if Rule is on, I think they started selling these late. But if somebody remembers the Corns Warehouse, that's exactly where I actually finished 5th in the Michigan 500 one year. I thought I was the best thing ever. So I still remember that. So this thing was pretty sweet. So it was a single piece. It's a triple hit. So they actually bent the ears, hit it again, bent the sides, and then you had these cooling holes to get a little more surface area and weight. If I remember right, this was about a $40 part. Remember, the car sold on the street for about $160. This was $40. Now, it did a few things. One, the car had huge problems cooling. You didn't have this piece. I think it's cast aluminum, but again, if the Bolink guys are on, they can correct me what these were made out of. The car just had a really hard time getting heat away from the motor. This really fixed that problem because we had so much more surface area and contact here, and then it would go across the whole car. It also made, I think it made the car handle a little bit better. You still had essentially the same points that you could do. Now, these 2 center holes, if you wanted to run a single shock configuration, so you would actually move this shock to here, and then you would go back to tweak screws down here, and you could run it as a single shock car. I didn't go through these, but that was actually the rear wing mount. We always ran wings on these cars back in the day, and literally, guys, that is kind of the story on this one. So let me switch over to the board here and see. I missed a few things coming down. A bunch of Michigan people on. I love it. Let's see. Oh, I didn't know Hot Trick was out of Wilkesboro. That was before I moved down. And yeah, that's right. Chris was the original, one of the original guys on the Dominator at the time. But Custom Works, what an interesting point. Custom Works was still in California, I think, at that time, and Chris was driving it for him over here. So let's see. Oh, there are some quick changes on eBay. I can't, yeah, probably not now. Let's see. We covered that one. What is your name? My name. So I should have said that at the beginning. If you guys don't know, I'm Alan Hinchman, and let's see. Ever heard of a dirt car called the Badger? No, Mark. I'd love to learn about that. They still race those in Encino. Oh man, that would be awesome. That's one of the places I never got to go. But we actually had the Major Taylor Velodrome here, our where I grew up, which was in Indianapolis. So we did a bunch of velodrome racing, 90, 92, 93 to about, I think they went into 2000, and they ran into some issues. Seems like the school took over the track, and they actually had a fatality. They were racing go-karts there and had a fatality, and that was in go-karts, but it's still, they changed the configuration a little bit, took everybody off the high banks, and then insurance got them, I think. But and now they're not really interested in renting it out. The let's see, remember the Badger? Yep, needs a proper front end. Yeah, let's see. DeCorns was awesome. Yeah, that was where it was at. It was in DeCorns warehouse. It was like a gigantic paperclip, by the way. We should do, maybe I'll have to dig that up. I have a bunch of old photos of some of those places. Let's see. Oh, Daniel, he came from California and married a lady here. Oh, I didn't know that. Raced at Indy 91, 92. Yeah, that was sweet. In fact, maybe if you guys will join us back next week, I have an Indy car that ran Indy about that time. We covered the Woods Indy car a couple of weeks ago. But maybe we'll go back and hit some Indy cars. I have Jamie, it sounds like you got too many. You should get rid of one. Marion College bought the velodrome. Yep, that's exactly it, Brian. That's the story I heard. All right, well, we are right up on the 30-minute mark, which is where we kind of try and keep these. Any other questions about the Bolink Eliminator 10? Otherwise, join us again next week. We've got 4 or 5 more really cool cars. So we're going to have at least 6. I think we can go for about 10 weeks of cars without having to loop through them. And we've got a few folks now that have asked to come on and show some of their stuff. So we'll probably start doing that and mixing in some other people telling some great stories from the 90s racing. Let's see what we got. Let's see. You still got the body from Sideways City? You got to come on the show, Mike, and talk about that. I need to dig up Terry Reniger and those guys. They were all big in that area at the time. All right. Any other comments? Final ones. Let's see. Yeah, we will. Corns ain't showing his stash. I have spent some time in Mark Corns' library of cars, and I can talk him out of stuff every once in a while, but it takes me a lot of work. You've got some Tamiya F102s. That's actually the cars we're going to show next week. So we're going to move from, I forgot, if you're wondering, if you're a new person, I've actually got a more modern. This is a Associated R5. This is the last Associated car that they made, but I wanted to show it in comparison to, and I think I just heard the other camera click off, so we're going to do it on here. But essentially, that is the difference between a narrow and a wide car. Essentially, basically, one tire track difference, and it was significantly faster. Once these came in, it allowed us to do bodies that were a little more proportional. The speeds shot way up, and there was never a chance for the wide car to catch up. And also, the tracks began to change, and cap tire racing came in. Foams got better, and the only place that you would still see a wide car would have been maybe Cleveland for a number of years more. You would have saw them, in some of the road racing stuff. But LTOs and narrow cars, they absolutely won the day. The 10LSS finished off the battle, became the standard of pan cars for the rest of the time. And but Bolink still around today under RS Speed. You can still get a lot of different things. Now, one of the other things, though, is Bolink made some incredibly awesome bodies. And there's a few of them that are unicorns out there. So if you're sitting on the Lincoln Bolink body, that's a very desirable body. There's a Beretta. There was a LeBaron. There were some short track Thunderbird and Lumina. They also made about 3 different versions of the Lumina, and then a number of Pontiacs, Oldsmobiles. They actually had a really nice Oldsmobile too. So again, full deal. I mean, Bolink just was one of those incredible companies, made a ton of stuff, set the industry. I mean, they really did. They had bodies and cars that were cutting edge, super high quality, all the way up through kind of the heyday of that. So let me look one last time. The F110, yeah, they are. And so, yep, that's right, exactly right, Mark. It was the Team Associated Super Speedway. So, all right. I appreciate everybody joining us again. Appreciate everybody that's old enough to remember these things on the track. And take care and have a great evening. And if you have a chance, join us for Sticky Icky Live Thursday nights at 8:30. Much different show. If you're this first time watching this one, Sticky Icky Live is around kind of modern day racing technologies. We get into a lot of chassis components and theories and things like that. So if you get a chance, join us again on Thursday. And otherwise, please join us again next week. We'll have another super cool car. And I happen to know in 2 weeks, Jim Pullman is stopping by with an original Trinity Reflex car, which he was showing me today is an amazing piece. And so we're going to switch from pan cars to dirt cars and kind of show little things that were going on in the 90s. So take care and appreciate you joining us.